Welcome back. We're at the next episode of the Hide Podcast. We're here today at Milford Hill, Wisconsin's premier shooting facility, and we are sponsored today by Camo. It's Wisconsin's #1 camo gear. And we're here today with Brad Koele, Wisconsin DNR Nuisance and Damage Specialist.
Wildlife Federation's The Hide.
And we've had Brad on here in the past, and before we get into some of the other topics that we want to talk about, I do want you to give everyone kind of a brief description again of what it is that the Nuisance and Damage Program does.
So the Nuisance and Damage Program obviously provides assistance to homeowners, agricultural producers, municipalities for dealing with wildlife conflicts, whether it's deer, bear, elk, turkey, geese, you name it. We do provide assistance, when folks are having conflicts with wildlife.
And again, we do have conflicts with wildlife. I know you and I probably take daily phone calls of whether we're talking turkeys sitting in down by Milwaukee, downtown Madison, blocking traffic, or we're talking deer out in cornfields or anything else. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's nice to have a bunch of them, but when you have a bunch of them, that's when the problems start happening. So,
there's plenty of conflicts around the state, and every day, different conflict, and of course, a different species, So.
And again, the thing is whether it's a conflict for farmers or it could be a conflict for the golf course. There's too many Canada geese on our golf course, or it's a conflict for a municipality because the turkeys are attacking the people walking out of the grocery store, or things along those lines. So again, it's not necessarily always just a conflict for, damage or things associated with the bottom dollar, how much money they make. It's anything and everything out there, right?
Are there areas of the state right now that have significantly more damage overall than other areas? Or is it fairly kind of spread out or specific to the species causing the damage?
Yeah, it's a lot of it's specific to the species, but certainly southern part of the state by far is where you see the most conflicts, just because you have that, urban, rural interface and, wildlife habitat within municipal areas and things like that. So certainly the southern part of the state where you have a higher population and certainly high or healthy wildlife populations too, you see those conflicts.
Yeah, bird feeders provide great food.
Bird feeders, not only for birds, but small mammals, and of course small mammals attract fox and coyotes, and
right,
absolutely,
right. So in the past we kind of covered deer and elk, but today, our large carnivores, especially bear. A lot of my friends, they live up north, Rhinelander, Woodruff, Eagle River, Hayward. And over the last 5 to 7 years, I bet the number of bear nuisance complaints, not even necessarily damage, but nuisance complaints, from these folks have significantly, increased.
Yeah, so I'm from the Woodruff area myself, and certainly, those kind of more touristy or vacation type areas, you see a high level of, nuisance complaints, just because a lot of people aren't used to dealing with those wildlife species. They come over from the Twin Cities or from, Illinois and come north, and they're just not used to dealing with bear.
It doesn't matter what size bear.
Yeah,
bear are scary,
Every bear is big, So, we DNR partners with Wildlife Services to respond to bear conflicts. So we have a cooperative agreement with them. They maintain a 1-800 toll-free line. So at any point on, after hours, holidays, weekends, people can call and report bear conflicts and get a timely response. So those complaints come in there each year. The number of complaints varies, probably from 700 to 800 complaints a year is what they receive. The majority of those complaints we can resolve just by providing advice, technical assistance, and most of it's attractants. Remove, your garbage cans, leave them in the garage.
Big bird feeders.
Bird feeders, like you talked about. clean your grill, things like that. So that's the majority of complaints that we receive. But if there are more severe complaints, Wildlife Services will set traps, live traps, culvert traps, and relocate bears that are causing problems.
And I know that's always that's the last resort situation because, right, if we trap one and we move it somewhere else, inherently we're just transitioning the problem to potentially somewhere else, right?
Potentially, yeah. So, and obviously when you're moving a bear, you take that into consideration. So when we move a bear, Wildlife Services moves a bear, that's what we look at. We look at releasing those bears on large tracts of public land, remote areas where they're not going to get into trouble right away, hopefully.
How many bears do we move? I mean, over the last 10 years, you can go on to cable channels, right? Especially if you have Spectrum, you can go and see numerous conservation law enforcement programs, and they all relocate a bear, right? How many do we relocate?
Yeah, it obviously fluctuates on the year. Some years it's 500 to 600 bear we're moving. Our Wildlife Services is moving. Majority of those bear are being moved in response to agricultural to corn damage. Right. But on the nuisance side of things, bears that are causing property damage or bears in urban areas, probably maybe 250 bear a year are being moved.
Wow, that I would have never guessed that many. I would have guessed, a handful.
And then I believe your guys' program also kind of transitioning a little bit in terms of, other payments is you guys do typically handle, do you do with the dog issues for people that are running bear for hunting seasons? And is that within your program or is that outside of your program?
Yeah, that's outside our program.
Okay.
If someone's out there recreationally hunting, with hounds and stuff, yeah, that's outside of our program. Where we do get involved in those is in the wolf program, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then we may get involved depending on what happens. But yeah, 28,000 bear, if you look at the zones, hunters are waiting anywhere from 2. If you look at zone B, they're waiting 11 years for a permit. So our program is mainly non-lethal by trapping and relocating those bear rather than trying to euthanize them
which really does it puts you guys you're in a tough position here because you have to deal with damage and nuisance, and we're getting lots of complaints or moving but meanwhile the hunter is sitting there saying I got to wait 11 years to get a tag, and you're saying there's plenty of bear out here. If they're causing all these problems, how do we manage that? And so that kudos to you guys are trying to balance all of that.
It's got to be tough.
Yep.
It has to be tough.
Yeah, you try to balance it. And when we did the bear management plan in 2019, there was a public attitude survey as well. And obviously, non-lethal management, particularly trapping and relocation, was supported by the public. Over 70% of respondents supported trapping and relocation versus some lethal control. So it's supported. And obviously, it's a benefit to keep those bears on the landscape if we can.
So you mentioned wolves. And I think I've heard wolves in the news a little bit. Just a little. But I guess kind of transition into what are some of the situations that you deal with wolves?
Yeah. So, we have a wolf conflict program. I started administering that in 2012 when they were delisted a couple attempts ago. So under state statute, we provide compensation for death or injury to livestock, hunting dogs, and pets. And I should clarify, hunting dogs not actively engage in training or trailing wolves. So we have that compensation program. Again, we partner with USDA Wildlife Services. So when we get a call or report of a wolf conflict, they actually go out, whether it's a farm or whether it's, in the middle of Chequamegon where a hunting dog was depredated, they go out there, they do an investigation, and they try to verify that. Once they verify that, then the claimants or animal owner can file a claim with the department, to seek compensation, and then those claims come to me. So we deal with everything from livestock, and that can include, hobby animals like alpacas and horses and things like that, goats, sheep, to, large beef and cattle operations. We've dealt with, just this year, we had a depredation within a captive deer farm where wolves got inside a captive deer farm fence and depredated a fawn in there. And then pets, we've had pet dogs depredated, and then of course hunting dogs.
And now with wolves relisted, essentially our program provides the compensation part of it. However, when they were delisted, there was also, allowing landowners tags to essentially manage a problem wolf that was coming in and having problems, but now with it being currently relisted, you can't.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So depending on listing status, that it limits our toolbox. So when wolves are listed, federally listed like they are now, we're limited to non-lethal abatement techniques, with the exception of human health and safety issues. If there's a demonstrable threat to human health and safety, we can implement lethal control. Otherwise, we're restricted to non-lethal. When wolves are state managed, then we do have the option for lethal controls. And lethal controls can include trapping by USDA Wildlife Services, and it can include permits issued to landowners and livestock owners, and then it can also include administrative rule. There's a rule that allows landowners or occupants of land to shoot wolves that are in the act of killing, wounding, or biting domestic animals. So there's that reactionary authority there to remove wolves in that case too.
So 2 questions for me is, one, how many animals are harvested by wolves on average? And then how do we relocate them at all? I mean, have we live trapped and relocated wolves recently? And how many, if so, on a yearly basis?
Yeah, so on a yearly basis, and again, this is just what we're able to verify. We probably have 50 to 60 animals that are depredated, mainly beef calves. They're out on pasture, they're small, they're vulnerable, to wolf
Sure. depredations.
So not a huge amount of animals, certainly, but, for an individual producer, that can be significant for loss. We typically do not relocate wolves. There are a number of county resolutions where counties don't want problem wolves moved into those counties.
Sure. Yep.
And certainly we don't want to move wolves either because of the territorial nature of wolves.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have in recent years, this year, we have moved one wolf, and that was that wolf that was inside that captive deer farm. We just relocated trapped the wolf from within the captive deer farm and moved it outside. So it didn't move any considerable distance. We released it within the same pack territory and continue to monitor it.
Yeah, and I think, the reason I asked that question is, I hear a lot of complaints, and I think a lot of them come from folks that hear rumors, and cougars and wolves probably take up the most rumors. Like, the DNR is releasing cougars here, the DNR is releasing wolves there, and
Our
so
black
on.
helicopters.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Yeah,
So,
yep.
I think it's important for folks to understand that is nowhere near the first option, and it's in this case it is extremely rare, and it will have a special purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, like I said, I've been with the wolf depredation program since 2012, and the only scenarios where we have moved wolves were wolves that were in captive deer farms,
Sure.
that were trapped inside. So yeah, it's very infrequent that we do that.
We're not bringing wolves from northern Wisconsin and dropping them in central Wisconsin or southern Wisconsin.
Right.
Absolutely.
So as far as wolves being killed while they're listed, that again is another specialty case where it's almost like a last resort, or the only option, right?
Yep.
So on average, people are going to ask, how many of those situations exist on a yearly basis?
Very, very few. This year, none. We haven't implemented any lethal control. Other years, maybe 1 or 2 times. And those are cases where those wolves are highly habituated. Numerous times they're coming in close proximity to human occupied dwellings or showing aggressive behavior, things like that. So yeah, it's I don't want to say fairly high, but it is a fairly high threshold to meet that
Sure.
level for
Speaking
lethal
of
control.
the human safety, we had a scenario this year with another large carnivore species with a cougar, right? For the first time, I think we've had it in a long, long time, where we had a cougar that was actually shot because a person was afraid. I mean, how much do you and your program deal with cougar? I know we don't, we have some that move through the state, but again, I don't know how much of that does take up your time.
Yeah, very little.
Yeah.
Like I said, we do have cougars every year that move through the state. They're sighted in multiple areas, but for the most part, they haven't caused conflict.
Yeah.
We've conducted each year, there's 2 or 3, maybe 4 investigations where somebody reports a cougar depredation. USDA Wildlife Services will go out there and investigate. They, will verify that it's some other animal, or, there's just not enough evidence there to support it was a cougar. So,
And aside from the one that was killed this last year in 2023, when was the last time Wisconsin had a cougar that was killed?
boy, I saw some data in some newspaper articles, but I can't remember what that date was. It's been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we had a recent visit to one of the museums in Madison, and I think it was like the early 1900s was like the last time that we actually had a hunter harvest a cougar, due to, concerns about health or safety. Or back then, who knows, it might have just been around here because it was over 100 years ago. So
right.
The ghost of the woods. Right.
Yeah. Very few of them. And that they're so nomadic, you might see it over in, Marquette County one day and, 2 days later, it might be up in, Portage County. Who knows?
Sure.
They're so nomadic, they're constantly moving. And yeah, knock on wood, so far they have not caused any conflict.
Awesome.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Brad, for being here. I think this is something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And it's good for them to kind of hear this from the person that manages it, because there's, like Mark said, a lot of rumors fly around, and I know specifically it's a lot easier to have someone come to you and ask you rather than hear from a friend of a friend of a friend, and then you're telling another friend what your other friend said. So, no, I think that this is awesome, and I think people really find it interesting.
Yeah, a lot of rumors and misperception out there, so glad to come and share what I know.
This is great. Thanks much.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everyone, for listening to the Hide Podcast. I want to thank Brad for being here. Thank Mark for whatever it is he did. And thank Chase, again, for the man behind the camera with grit, making us all look good and Mark better than most. And again, with that, thank you, Wilford Hills, for having us here. And thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.